Hi guys, Ms. Nickerson here. Today we're going over biological cycles. We are in chapter 2 on page 45, section 3. We left off chapter 2 talking about biological pyramids, biotic factors, and how energy flows through an ecosystem. Part of that energy flow is by cycling of matter. So everything, maybe you've heard the term before, like you were once, part of the stars. That's true. All the atoms that make up you were once found in the deepest parts of the cosmos and will someday again end up there. So how does matter cycle through our different systems on Earth is kind of what we're going to be taking a look at this week. All right. So we're going to start with important vocabulary. I have a star on this because the book actually does not list a ton of important vocabulary for each of the different systems. However, we're going to do some activities in class that highlight some of that vocabulary. So make sure you know the important vocabulary of each cycle. All right. What are we talking about? We're talking about biological cycles, and biological cycles are how we move different materials and elements from abiotic and biotic components, how they flow through. So how the atoms that are part of you eventually become part of the dirt or part of the atmosphere and then back into becoming part of a living organism. All right, so let's turn the page to page 46 and 47. It starts off with the water cycle. Now, I feel like the water cycle you guys have a pretty good understanding of. You've went through that since you were pretty young, and how water evaporates. It gets condensed in the atmosphere and then falls, and how it's the sun driving that cycle by evaporating the water over the oceans, okay? But there are some important vocabulary down here you could take a look at. But then we're going to load in some cycles you may not feel as comfortable with. So carbon and oxygen. We're going to be focusing on carbon the first couple of days in class. Carbon is a great molecule. It has 6 electrons. So that puts 2 electrons in its first energy shell and 4 in a second. And it means that it loves to bond with itself. So you'll find carbon and chains in many different organisms and many different things that are alive. We are known as carbon-based life forms, and that's one of the reasons. So taking a look at the carbon cycle and how things move through it, it is very closely related to the oxygen cycle. So you can read about the carbon cycle and the oxygen cycle and how they're related to one another, okay? Then we go into the nitrogen cycle. So the nitrogen cycle, we have a lot of nitrogen in the Earth's atmosphere, and it's difficult for the nitrogen to get locked into biotic portions or features. So it's difficult to lock it into living organisms. A lot of it's found in the atmosphere. And so this process talks about how we can lock it into the soil or into organisms for those living features use, okay? And lastly, we have the phosphorus cycle. The phosphorus cycle, it can go through a very quick cycle, or it can go through a long-term cycle like nitrogen does. You'll see also that it's found in living organisms, but it's going to cycle through in a different pattern than any of the other 2 that we've looked at so far. So make sure you take a look at the phosphorus cycle as well. You're going to be choosing in class to do a project on either the nitrogen cycle or the phosphorus cycle. And so you can use these 2 parts of the book as a starting point for researching those cycles. So you have to do a lot more than just the book here, but this is a great starting point. Okay, and that's it. This is a very short chapter. It's only about 5 pages to read, so please make sure you get that done. We covered pages 45 through 49 in these sticky notes. Thanks.